So Brandon is visiting us from out of town. We're going to start with a question of his.
You often say look at it, or at least you said that to me quite a bit.
I often say look at it.
Could you compare and contrast like looking at it opposed to just thinking?
Okay, good. That's good. So quite often we all get, as we practice sitting meditation, we sit and we're not sure what we're doing or whether what we're doing is correct or incorrect, or are we getting anywhere, or should I or shouldn't I? And the teaching person, he or she, can't really get inside of your consciousness and say, oh, no, you're wasting your time there. You need to go this, do this. So it isn't possible, particularly to do that. So all we can do is, interact with the teacher or someone that you could say trust or give the benefit of the doubt to. Listen to what they say, and endeavor to follow that instruction. And even though I taught shamatha vipassana, which is mindfulness awareness, the Tibetan is Laktung Shine, and then there's probably lots of other fancy names for it. But it's basically a provisional teaching that talks about what to do. If you notice, when you sit still and don't do anything, the mind just goes kind of crazy. It goes this way, it goes that way. You think about this, think about that. Then it seems like you get caught up in some kind of a story, and you actually leave the room. You end up in some other world of, passion, aggression, ignorance, jealousy, something going on, trying to do this, trying to do that, trying to keep this from happening. It's kind of like we make these little plans. And then maybe somebody closes the door, or there's a noise outside, or maybe nothing. Maybe we just suddenly end up back. It's almost like a weight. You can feel the awareness just kind of boom, back in your body again, and here you are. And then there's kind of a gap or a space. And then there's maybe that inquisitiveness about what should I be doing? What should I have done with that? Was that bad? Shouldn't I have gone there? It's just a constant talking to ourselves about. And so teachers down through the centuries, starting with the Buddha immediately saw what a difficult situation he had ahead of him, because he realized they were not. And so he just provisionally started setting up forums to help people do what? Hold still. To help people do what? See what is actually occurring. To help people do what? Stop adding and subtracting and dividing and judging your experience, which all it does is build up a separate identity that is what? Succeeding, failing. It's just it's why they call it samsara, or the wheel of samsara. Everything is very circular in the physical relative world of cause and effect. Awakening doesn't even have anything to do with cause and effect. It's actually realizing what cause and effect rests on. Just a relative way of talking about the absolute. It needs to do something or not. And so it's just the ultimate situation, which doesn't have anything to do with light and dark, moving ahead, moving behind, any kind of a polarity. So what we find is when we hold very still and approximate doing nothing, provisionally you might be taught to, follow your breath. Follow your breath when thoughts arise, label thinking and return to the breath. Label thinking to try to get you to be here. Of course, this can be accomplished. You can become, if you do this for several decades, you can become extremely good at being present? Not really. It's a relative situation. Present as opposed to not present is still relative. Like I sometimes say, if you feel like you're awake, you're not. If you feel like you're being present, you're not. If you feel like you're in the now, you're full of bananas. I know there might be some young people watching here that don't know what those other words mean. So what do we do when we sit down, especially if we've been meditating for a few years, or even a few months, and we see that no matter what happens, we get tied up in this, or abandoned by this, or pushed this way or pushed that way. it doesn't really feel like there's any progress. And fundamentally, there isn't any progress other than you might be just better at holding still and sitting there. That's some progress. I'd say it's progress just to meditate at all. To actually take some time out of our busy schedule of trying to not fail, to succeed, to keep our money, to keep our relationships the way we want them, of course. Some relationships we don't want. There's a constant chatter, manipulation, and objecting to or meddling with. Whatever arises, we meddle with it. So what you could begin to do is to see the way in which you meddle. And Brandon's question about well, what is awareness and what is maybe thinking or thinking about awareness, or what really does need to happen in that area as a practice. How do we actually practice this? And it's been said that there's a provisional approach, and then there's a definitive approach. So the provisional is more with the cause and effect situation. We have to start somewhere. We have to have third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. We can't just take a 5-year-old and put them in the university. There's a few of them that when you talk to them, they probably ought to jump a few grades ahead. And everyone, it's an amazing, every person who receives meditation instruction will take whatever that instruction is and make it their own, or the interaction of that instruction with their particular combination of causes, conditions, their tendency to be clear on some things and really cloudy on others, their tendency when certain things happen that triggers some activity in the mind that starts to shut everything down, they ignore. Sometimes if you're talking to someone, you can actually see, if you're present in the room, you can actually see when the cloud of ignorance comes over someone's mind. You can see their facial expression go, I'm gonna overdo it here, so you can see it's kind of like, yeah, I'm overdoing it. But there's a little tinge of that happening where they just suddenly are no longer looking at you, no longer listening. They're really not there. They're not gone completely, but most of their discontinuous identity is busy off somewhere else, fixing something, repairing something, analyzing something, looking through something, sorting. So the line from the Sokuzan Mai that shows up here is, when erroneous imaginations cease. When erroneous imaginations cease, erroneous imaginations, as if there was something that was an actual imagination. But when erroneous imaginations cease, the acquiescent mind realizes itself. So you don't realize anything. When erroneous imaginations cease, sometimes Trungpa Rinpoche would talk about ego as something that's like a shoe. You just have to walk on it till it wears out. You don't have to throw it out or get a new shoe. You just wear it out. Sometimes I've heard other teachers say, and I would say this also, that you have to do this until you're just exhausted. You're just sick of trying to see what is real, see what is sanity, what is real, what can I really believe, trust, what is this? Beyond the structure of Buddhism and the 2,500-year tradition, what is it right now, this moment? Because if it's not in this moment, if it's just some ancient teaching you're looking at, trying to believe in or tear apart or whatever, then it's more circular. Not wrong, it's just circular. There's nothing wrong with merry-go-rounds. Get on one as long as you want for your whole life. Some people for their whole life are going around and around and around and around in some kind of probably materialism, but some kind of spiritual materialism or something. When the acquiescent mind realizes, when the erroneous imagination ceases, you can see how dyslexic I am. I have transcendental dyslexia. When erroneous imaginations cease, the acquiescent mind realizes itself. So when you sit down and you're practicing and you're thinking about thinking, or you're thinking about awareness, or you're aware that you're thinking about thinking, you're aware that you're thinking about awareness, and you're trying to, you feel kind of confused about the whole situation, like, I'm not saying that Brandon's necessarily confused, but it is an area where what do I do in this situation? How do I work with this? So when erroneous imaginations cease, the acquiescent mind realizes itself. So what you're basically doing is there's no one here or no one that's watching it that is separate from the Buddha, separate from sanity, separate from fundamental awakening. So we're not fundamentally separate, but we keep covering it up with stuff, with fear, with hope that things are going to change, with the second noble truth of wanting things to be different than they are, or desire or craving. So we're doing that on some level. We want something to be different than it is. The sitting practice of meditation, as it's taught provisionally, looks like, well, if I meditate and I practice shamatha vipassana or meditation awareness, that eventually I'll get myself so I'm more and more better, more and more clear, less and less crazy. There's something to that. Just by holding your body still, since body and mind are not fundamentally separate, we tend to settle down. So there is quite a bit of settling down. A lot of teachings and a lot of teachers actually teach this way and actually get you to settle down. Nothing wrong with that. It's everybody should hold still for a little while every day. But in order to see clearly who you are, who you really are, who you've always been, even before this body was born, who you've always been. Always is a relative term, but it's pointing to something that's always been. It's so much always that it's not even been. It's not even existent. It's neither existent nor is it non-existent. That's difficult for the self-centered ego, cause and effect, hope and fear mind to work with, because we're basically talking about something that can't really be understood in a relative way. And it actually can't be understood. You can't understand what you already are. You already are this. So what we're really doing on the cushion is we're sitting down and we're watching the erroneous imaginations cease, and what I like to say is, don't do anything unless you have to. On the cushion, off the cushion. In this way, you don't add on to the karma and the causes and effects that you've already are generating just by thrashing around. So if you hold very still, think of the image there. If you just hold very still, if you do this in your everyday life, I'm not saying go around and be meditative. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that. I'm saying really be in. If you're talking with someone, be there with how they look, how you feel. Stay in your senses. Don't forget gravity. Like I like to say, it's not forgetting you. It's to someone who is clear about this. It is so obvious. It's like everyone has their head up their butt. Sorry, but it's just like that. It's like you can talk, you can interact, you can talk about the weather, but you can fundamentally see that they're wearing blinders in some way, and there's no way you, even though you don't particularly have blinders on, there's no way you can reach over and take them off or tell them what to do unless they ask you. That's why we have this structure. So it's kind of a setup so that somebody can sit up here and look important. Somebody can sit down here and look unimportant, or the teacher and the student. Just a bunch of preconceptions. But we need some kind of a strong polarizing dynamic so that the awareness can see more clearly what a crapshoot this is. So that you can actually come and sit and hold still. That contrasts with the rest of your life. So the awareness begins to do something. The awareness begins to just look at what's happening rather than push on it, pull on it, shut down on it, ignore it, push it away, judge it. Well, all of the kind of things that happen. So when the acquiescent, I have to read it again. When erroneous imagination cease, the acquiescent mind realizes itself. The other one at the bottom is just a continuous in this way. It's called the host within the host. So there's a host and a guest, but then it's the host within the host. So it's a relative way of talking about something that's not actually hooked up in a relative way. You can't destroy it. You can't create it. It looks like and this is quite often promoted even, especially by those who don't really understand this, have not actually seen reality, to say it in an outlandish way. We'll assume that there's something to be accomplished here, that we can actually sit here and get better and better and better, and then finally, I'm finally here. We use those images all the time. We look at the mountain. We go up the mountain so that we can see the view on the other side. So that's the provisional path. We go up the mountain, and eventually we see reality at the top. So there's something to that. We have to talk about it that way in order to get people to even sit down and do this. But it's a journey that need not even be taken. There's nowhere to go. Nothing particularly to do. Question?
Yeah, and you've been touching on it. For me, you've been touching on it.
Yes.
You're talking at great length about, at some length about what happens when you're interacting with someone.
Yes.
The coming and the going, and all the mental stuff that goes on. How should one listen to one's teacher?
How should one listen to one's teacher? I think probably all doing the best we can right now. I'm listening to my teacher all the time, but it's not separate. So it's not like, what's he saying now? Where I have to tune in. It's always the case. He's never gone anywhere. He's never left. Once I met him, he just became more and more apparent. So I don't mean to sound mystical, or it's not like that at all. It's so ordinary. That's why we miss it. If you're looking at a completely sacred world all the time. Sacred, not as opposed to profane, but completely and utterly, totally valuable. And if we see that, then we want to take care of everyone on some kind of level that is not, or we don't really meddle with anything. So in order to listen to what the teaching person is saying, ask questions, and ask questions out of your understanding, lack of understanding. Make it as strong as you can. So that's what I would suggest. But it's doesn't seem to be a formula for it, other than I think keep doing. Yes.
And I'm writing my journaling a little bit this morning.
Yes.
Feel very full of what's been said.
Okay.
The last few days that I've been here, and what can I say about any of that? And I didn't really. I felt like I feel like it's kind of an absorption. With no particular. The image of being in the rain, of getting wet when it's hardly raining. There's just that mist in the air, and it just keeps soaking in and soaking in and soaking in. That's the way I feel like.
So do you have a question?
No, I'm just saying that's. Well, my question is.
So you have a statement, but you don't have.
Can I say that? Can I see that as a form of listening? As absorption.
You can, but don't write about it. As soon as we go, and I'm not against any kind of writing, or I write myself. So, but in that area, I would not be too definitive about it. I would let it be what it is. You can talk about it somewhat, but I don't mean to be squelch your journaling particularly.
What I find is that I can't write about it other than to say I feel like.
Well, that's nice.
It's nothing better.
Sakio, Brandon, is there something else beyond that question? We could go a little deeper. Awareness, thinking was that helpful to you? So I like to say it this way. If you're holding still, I said it in the meditation instruction, if you're holding very, very still and you're endeavoring to just observe what is arising, then whatever arises is exactly what needs to arise, no matter how horrible it is. Or the lack of anything arising is exactly what needs to not arise. Whatever your state of mind. Holding very, very still. And this doesn't mean you can't, stretch a little bit, but then go back to holding very still. And you'll notice if you're holding very still, the mind continues to move. The mind, the thought process, the adding, the subtracting, the guesswork, and the fretting, the worrying about things, and wondering what's going to happen next. And we're always regretting the past, or wanting to go back in the past, or projecting into the future. Just 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, what's going to happen then? We're living in some kind of a future situation. Yes.
So you often say not to, or
Yeah.
no separation. So is the seeing or looking when we're facing the wall different from the seeing that we see when we're not looking at
You would ask me that. It's the same, but for me to say that is, I have to see that everything you see is the same and different. Sandokai, it's the equality of sameness and difference. That you have to actually see that there's no separate things anywhere. That's why we hold still, so that we can see. But the sitting itself isn't cause and effect. It's just that you're not going to. It could be called a cause and effect. You're not going to throw out any more stuff. You're just going to hold still and observe. And then, like it says in the text, the acquiescent mind realizes itself. You have to talk about this in a relative way, but you're actually, the realization, when you see it, you thought, well, I didn't even do this. And that's why quite often any kind of spiritual, use that word, realization or understanding or breakthrough is often called grace. Like I just suddenly didn't, I no longer had problems. Even my problems weren't problematic. There's really no objection, nor any agreement with anything. That's why it's sometimes called freedom. It's not freedom from something. It's not freedom to do something. It's fundamental freedom from the addiction to that constant thought process of I, me, mine, I, how I feel, my feelings, these feelings, this situation or that, or my jealousy, or my worrying or fretting, or my loneliness for that matter. Michael.
Spiritualism and materialism, what makes them different?
You mean the materialistic path and the spiritual path? The mundane path is about accomplishing something, getting somewhere, and the spiritual path starts that way. It has to have some kind of but then as you go along, you actually begin to transcend the need for praise or blame. You begin to transcend that and realize that you're not operating out of that situation, out of success and failure, praise and blame. You're actually transcending. Unless you're using the spiritual path as a material, as trying to get somewhere, gaining something. That's what spiritual materialism is. And as it says in the introduction to Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, Trungpa Rinpoche's book published in 1972. The three lords of materialism: Lord of Form, Lord of Form, Lord of Speech, Lord of Mind. Just different ways of being materialistic. Yes.
You said that it's not a journey.
Yes.
But isn't the path a journey?
Until it's not. So it's a journey without a goal. There's a book by Rinpoche. It's a journey without a goal. So it's a journey that need not be taken. Sometimes the image is used of the person who leaves his house looking for his father. He goes over mountains and rivers and through different countries and comes back and finally sees the back of the house. And he goes in the door and there his father's been sitting at the kitchen table the whole time. So he didn't have to go anywhere. He was always in his lap. But it has to be seen. You can't just think it up, and you can't. And when you listen to the concepts as they're, because I'm using concepts. Obviously, we're using a relative situation to point to something that is completely fantastically amazing and completely ordinary at the same time. That's called not two or non-duality. It's like if you look down at the example I sometimes give you, look down at the ground, there's the ground, dirt. But if you look up in the sky, you can't see anything. I mean, you can see stuff, but if your gaze kept going and going and going, it would never stop. It's like it's the relative a relative way of saying it, that it's not two different things. You can't have endlessness without something solid. You can't have something solid without endlessness. Emptiness is form. Form is emptiness. They're not separate. Yes.
So you can't have spiritualism without materialism.
Exactly. And precisely. And definitively. So what does that say? What does it say? It is actually pointing at something that can't be described. And in a sense, sometimes it's called experiencing it. And I think there are experiential aspects to it, because when this begins to occur, you realize that all the things that used to be so important to you they're still there. They find their own place within the matrix of just being alive, having thoughts. You're fine with thoughts. You're fine with emotions. You're fine with angry feelings about this or that or the other thing. When I say you're fine, I'm not saying that there's some kind of person who is fine. I'm saying that the situation itself, whatever arises, is not separate from anything else. To ego, this is frightening. If you're self-centered, I mean, if you believe there's somebody here that can win or lose or look good or look bad, then the whole world is going to look like promises and threats. On some level, a promise and a threat. But if you're no longer separate from anything, you might find yourself doing something like this or not. You might find yourself digging ditches and then filling them back in again. Shouldn't leave any open holes.
Have you described or talked about erroneous imaginations? What are erroneous imaginations?
So you're sitting on the cushion in a practice situation. You're sitting on the cushion and you're just thinking shit up. You're going this way and going that way, and you're evaluating. You're thinking this can't be right, or maybe you're beyond all that, and you just don't feel good. You just the whole dynamic is just tasteful on some level, and you don't really have a cause and effect situation happening, except you're here, and a little while ago you felt fine, and now you feel terrible. So there's a big contrast, and so what do I say about that? Just look at it. Don't add anything to it, including and this is the hard part, including your distaste for it, or your assumption that it will go. Sometimes there's even a practice where who's it? Byron Katie. It's a practice where you practice being fine with whatever's happening. You're fine with that. You're willing to do that forever. It's not too bad of a practice. Think of the next time you get in a really bad emotional struggle, some kind of situation where you just feel like you're about ready to blow up or fall apart, or kill yourself or kill somebody else. Just look at that and change your attitude. Change your attitude. In other words, that is you're a murderer forever. Doesn't mean put it in gear, but it just means the thing you're trying to get out of is creating the tension. You're actually creating the tension. So there has to be, and it's embarrassing. The ego, if there's some ego left, which there may or may not be, it's embarrassing to feel yourself go when you've worked so hard, you have such a strong spiritual path. You've just worked so hard for years at it, and you've been doing a little bit better, and really being nicer to yourself, nicer to others, and all of a sudden, you just go into hell. No, I don't. Maybe you haven't done that. Something to look forward to.
So with the erroneous imaginations, it says when they cease. Is that something that we do to make them cease?
Erroneous imaginations cease, and the way they, my understanding, and the way it looks over here, they cease when you don't fuel them. When the erroneous things, you like it, you don't like it, you just watch that, and it's more like, sometimes I say, it's like you've stepped off stage. You're no longer in your own play. It's like you step off stage and just people are fighting or doing, or they're, but it's a play. It's imaginary. It's like the three dharmas in the Yogacara tradition, the three dharmas of the imaginary nature, the dependent nature, and the realized or the absolute nature. Parikalpita. Parikalpita is the imaginary. You just keep making stuff up. Yes.
So is the acquiescent mind is always there?
Yes.
So what makes the erroneous imagination cease?
Not fueling them, not adding on, not making an assumption that you're separate from anything else and you can get ahead or fall behind. So we add on hope and fear, pushing this way, pushing that way. And by just holding still, if you hold still, if you do it enough, it starts to wear out. It starts to lose its source of energy because you're no longer energizing it. So it can feel pretty useless to do that. It can feel hopeless to do that.
So what are those intense feelings of rage or anger? Do they arise from the acquiescent mind?
Well, speak about it relatively, but not particularly. It's just things, energy moving this way and that way, and getting personalized by we impute things. We say, well, this must be, well, that must be because of. You'll notice yourself doing it just in conversation or just in thinking. Giving little tiny reasons for everything, little mini confirmations of our discursive mind. If you just have a conversation with someone, where all you do is listen. That's all you do. You can go like this, or you can go, or you can go. Still doing something, but a little as possible, and listen to the other person's tone of voice and their story about things, how they describe things, and don't do anything with it. We're not talking about evaluating or judging someone. We're just talking about your mind is in front of you in the form of everyone. The Buddha is in front of you in the form of everything you see. Everywhere you look, you see the Buddha. There's one. Everywhere you look, there's the Buddha. Am I ignoring you? Is that ignoring? What is that? You can't ignore what you're not separate from, what you are. So that's why you're always looking at it. This is talked about in the Mahamudra, in the Tibetan tradition. It's talked about Dzogchen, the great perfection. Lots of little practices leading up to that, but the fundamental situation is you just have to see it. In the Tibetan tradition, they say you see it by connecting with a teacher who sees it. And that's how you see it. Yes, sir.
Could you say erroneous perceptions?
Sure.
Would they be,
That would be all right.
what we were doing is that we perceive things?
Yeah, we think this is true and this is false. Divide everything up into that, and it's reinforced by society, by culture, by people we chat with and talk with. That's why quite often when we sit, we're kind of creating artificial, you could say, contrast between what we're doing the rest of our life, and now we're just going to hold still and do nothing. And the more kind of useless it feels, the more the awareness is actually in the room. Sheldon.
I think you're saying when we stop feeling our imaginations.
So ask me a question. You can make statements, but you might as well get up here if you want to make statements.
I'm not making this.
Okay.
We stop feeling imaginations. So we have imaginations and we don't feel those. Does that make those correct imaginations?
You know, it's a way of, it goes on Dongshan Lanji, this ancient Chinese guy, lineage holder actually, in our lineage. Was it Tozan Ryokai? But he tried to see a way where he could write this. This is translated out of the Chinese, where he could say this in such a way that would get us to see that we're just making stuff up. And then we're assuming some of it's true, some of it's false. And when those erroneous imaginations cease, the acquiescent mind, am I saying that right? Realizes itself. So then you realize it's always been there. You've always been who you are. You just cover it up with hope and fear. In my case, it was fear. That's why I would get so angry. And I knew if I was angry, I wouldn't be afraid. I didn't like the fear. Too proud. A lot of pride. Pride is still here. Fear is still here. Anger is still here. Nothing's been eliminated. But it's not separate anymore. So therefore, who's in charge? There's no authority anywhere. If there is, then we're back to theism again. We're back to duality. We're back to good and evil. Not wrong, just the way human beings have progressed along. And at some point, some human beings are ready to transcend this world. They may do it through any kind of path, I guess. I don't know. Being a circus performer.
Two questions from Shane.
Yes.
He asks, what is the error in erroneous imagination?
Thinking that it's real and means something, and that you have to do something about it, or you have to reject it, or you have to forget about it. Anything. You have to accept it. So we're right back to the three poisons. Passion, aggression, and ignorance. Accept, reject, or ignore. So it's erroneous. Imagination comes up, and we're doing one of those three things with it, more than likely. So if you, that's why you won't hear me say, just let go. I don't say that, because that's affirming a relative way of getting better. I'm not interested in that for myself, for you, or for anyone. If you want to do that, then fine. Talk to somebody else. I can't do that. All I can say is you don't have to do anything. You don't have to let go. You don't have to hang on. You don't have to ignore. And I'm not even going to say just be. I guess you could say that, but then that's more passion. I'm just going to be. You know, I used to not be. Now I just be. I got to be me. sure I'm mocking the whole thing, but it's difficult to talk about. And I sometimes say you can see why in ancient times they had a stick. If some old guy realized somewhere and it had all these people that were not, he probably thought, maybe I should just hit him. So, and that, that's not particularly trying to promote any way of teaching, but it's difficult for us to understand that you don't have to push on it, you don't have to accept it, you don't have to let go of anything if you see what it is. If you see what it is, then it may be there, it may not be, but you're not concerned with it. You can have intense desire, anger, jealousy, sexual stuff, anything could be there that's really intense. You don't have to do anything with it. If you do anything with it at all, then it tends to start to look like it's not so erroneous. I know this isn't real over here, but this is real. And what we do, we dig a trench with it. I often have given talks on this, digging a trench. Somebody comes up and steals your hat. Steals your what? Money?
Moped.
Moped. Steals your moped. And they're off on the moped. So you're, what point was I going to make? You lost me. I just started getting this great picture of a moped leaving that I didn't know. So somebody does something to you, harms you, takes your stuff, and you have a feeling like, okay, I can't, you know what I'm saying. I'm trying not to swear. You have this, they take it. I needed to get to ice cream parlor. So, and then you get it back, or maybe you don't get it back, well, whatever. But what I'm talking about, digging a trench, we say, well, he, she, somebody took that. They took it, and then we find out that it was the person down the road next door or somewhere, and then they shouldn't have done that. And what were they thinking? Don't they realize I need the moped? It's just a constant barrage of erroneous. And why is it erroneous? Nothing is separate. Separated. This is why we have precepts in our tradition, in our lineage, so that you can observe those things, not follow them. They are not laws. The first one is the one on first grade precept is on killing. Not to interrupt the mandala of the present moment. There's no taking life precept. So don't interrupt anything, including somebody taking your moped. Questions? We still have time. Yes.
Shane's other question,
Yes.
what's the reason you like mice?
They're cute. And they squeak. And they have really long whiskers. Really long whiskers. And when they move, the whisker goes.
And you're seeing all this, of course.
What?
Sokuzan has a question. What is energy?
Everything.
What was what?
Energy.
Energy.
Oh, what is energy?
Everything is energy. You know, it's like the saying, energy can't be created or destroyed. So, duh. So, you discovered that.
A question from Susan in Arizona.
Oh, Susan.
She
Hi,
says,
Susan.
hi. When the acquiescent mind realizes itself, will you know it? Does it tend to be a slow awareness or a light bulb moment or neither? Thanks.
Is that multiple choice or true or false? It's difficult to, and I understand people want to know, well, will you know it if you're, and I say, no, you won't know it because there's no one left to know anything. So there may be a knowing, but you don't mind. You don't mind if it happens, if it doesn't happen. It actually is not two. It actually is non-duality. You actually begin to live in a world without reference points. And when I say without reference points, this doesn't mean that there aren't reference points clamoring for your attention all the time, but you don't particularly do anything with them. So light bulb going off, that's just more relative truth. It's just relative. It might be a great thing. Wow, I just realized I was not separate from anything. As soon as you have a realization, or anything that appears will disappear. It's the nature of the world. Anything that's born dies. But what is unborn can't die. Unborn, unceasing with a nature like the sky. Unborn, unceasing with a nature like the sky. It's completely empty of itself and empty of what you think of it, and empty of form. Empty, empty, empty. Yes.
Another question from Kozan. During our study of the Platform Sutra yesterday, we read that paying attention to your own mistakes will keep you in step with the way. Is the use of the word mistakes here similar or different to the word erroneous that we're studying today?
Yeah, and it's we have to start somewhere. So it's a relative situation. So we work with the relative truth. We work with the ideas of mistakes, or the idea of trying to conform to the form in the temple. If it's time, if we live in this temple, there is a form, and it's 6.5 hours of sitting meditation every day. If you live here, or more, you're given more, and you do that. And if you don't want to do it, go somewhere else. But if you want to do it, then it's part and parcel of the whole situation. And within that situation, if you don't, let's say if you don't sit, you miss a period, and you just stay in your room, or you sit out in the garden, or you go for a walk, or you go get some ginger ale. It's not a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's only there so you can see the form. It's there so you can see the form. You have to see the form. So it's not to be obeyed. It's not to be ignored. You have to see it that it's your life. It's your practice. And so that relative kind of thing is a mistake and no mistake, which it starts out to be. Eventually you begin to see that you're trashing your own situation by doing that. It's not like there's a rule that somebody's going to get mad because you don't follow it. It's that you can see that the form is set up for you to clarify what's happening with your mind, the way you are addicted to relative truth, where you're addicted to success and failure, where you're addicted to something. Now, you may be addicted to golf. If you are, then probably nobody's going to care other than your spouse. You may be addicted to almost anything. It's something you have to have. You have to do it. So it's not a bad way to look at it.
Question from Carol Kayat in Minneapolis.
Carol, yes.
What is meant by definitive teaching, not provisional? Is this making the instruction your own?
Almost. But definitive is just saying, it's just saying the definitive situation, or relative situation is talking about karma. It's talking about the cause and effect, like working out of the 3 poisons: passion, aggression, ignorance, being in a relative context, the 12 links in the chain of existence, and all of the other relative teachings. Definitive teachings are more like you can't find it. You can't locate it. It's without location. It's without qualities. It's without anything. Although it's taught in things like the Lotus Sutra and lots of other forms where there's more of a singing the praises of the Buddha, so to speak. Just a way of teaching. We have to look at the cultures that this came through and how this is happening now. We have all these different ancient forms of Buddhism coming into this, and it's just a huge melting pot of things in the West, not only here, but like I was saying in talk last night, or whenever it was, like Australia or Canada, Europe. Brendan.
What was the most influential part? What was the most influential part of COVID to you? All right, when I say the most,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. That he had X-ray vision. He could look at you and see who you were, and see who you thought you were. That's how it felt. That's probably my projection onto him because he was, and also his just genuineness was threatening. Threatening.
His genuineness
Was threatening, yes. Because when you're around him, you felt how foolish you were and how self-deceptive you were and how full of shit you were. So he was powerful, and he didn't give a lot of talks. He didn't even allow anybody to publish any of his talks in a book. I think they're coming out with a book now of his talks. It was kind of hard to understand. So, but I think just his presence was his. It's been said by others that he was like the embodiment of bodhicitta, enlightenment, the mind of enlightenment.
To be the light. To be the light.
What about it?
Well, the few things that I've ever read about him, he talks about his name even had something to do with light.
I don't know. Houn was his darn name. Houn is cloud phoenix. So he's very much like that. He would just be there but not be there. He would just vanish. Even when he was there, he was not there. It took a while to see that. So I think it was threatening because I was operating out of, my teacher's gone now, so I'm doing pretty good here. So meeting him was very auspicious for me. He really didn't do anything other than he just kind of reflected back who I was, and he didn't actually do anything. He didn't have to. You don't have to do. Each teaching person, if he or she is realized, they don't have to. They're going to just do what they do. Some people will talk a lot. Some people won't. Some people set themselves way up on a thing with lots of junk on their head, and some people won't do anything. Some people will stay down at the dock and fish, and no advertisement. No advertisement for anything. No, yeah, I'm a teacher. I can help you. Senchu.
Did you say earlier that we will not understand who we actually are?
The understanding won't come in a relative kind of package where you kind of think I've got it, because that's just more relativity. It's valuable. It could be valuable. You realize that the understanding is an understanding, but it's not one that you can put words to. So it might, if you realize that, it might be a while before you can actually talk about it. One gazed at the tree for 10 eons. It says, no goes on mine. You see it, but anytime you start to talk about it, you feel like you're lying. So you see it, you understand it, and the minute you can't say it. And that's just an unwillingness to share the Dharma. You're hoarding it. You're hoarding your awakening because you think you're special, and you have realized it, but you have not returned to the marketplace. You got to come back. You got to come back, and you have to bring all of your neurosis with you. You have to bring all of your problems. Everything has to still be here. Otherwise, you can't teach. You can't really teach. Or maybe you can. I don't know. I'm probably wrong. Yes.
What is relative?
Aunts, uncles, cousins.
No, those are relatives. What do you mean when you say that this is a relative concept?
It has an opposite. Anytime you say one thing, you create something else. It's opposite. And they're dependent on each other for their apparent reality or individuality or identity.
For their parent.
For their apparent, yeah, because it's apparent.
So anything that is relative is just apparent.
I mean, I don't mean like parent. Let's not get into Punsville. Or I'm going to win. Yes. More.
If something is relative, it's created its opposite. And they are dependent on one another.
That's the way it looks. That's the way it seems.
What is this dependency?
Lack of the ultimate in terms of your perception. Ultimate would be to, we're always using relative terms, so it's kind of hard to get out of the bakery. We're always making stuff.
So there is no way to describe the ultimate then?
Not really. I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe somebody will come up with it. How about you guys? What do you guys think? You know, this is what poetry and music does. It we understand something, and our form may be music or maybe cooking. We aspire to bring disparate elements together and produce something that has some kind of genuineness to it. And it shows up everywhere. It shows up in somebody running a carpet cleaning company. Somebody wants to express something there. Or not. Maybe they just want to express making money.
So being able to see the spiritual and the material as one would be the ultimate, but you couldn't describe that?
No. Yeah. I know it's fun to do that, but not gonna.
It's still a concept.
It's all conceptual. And this is why it's so necessary to sit on a cushion rather than just debate and talk about it. There's lots of people who are really way more intelligent than this person who I would just have to shut up. I can't handle heavy conceptual repartee. It's too much. Simple, yes.
Just another question from Sokuzan.
Yes.
When Trungpa died, did you know you needed another living teacher before you met COVID?
No, I thought no, I didn't. No, when he passed, not much at all happened. I already felt like at a loss about the whole thing. I didn't know what to do. I practiced a lot. I feel like I hadn't gotten anywhere. And as I went along, then I thought, well, probably I did get somewhere. I mean, I've done all this. I must be doing okay. People like me. People think I know stuff, so maybe I do. Nah. Yeah, then I met Coben, and he showed me by not really doing anything. He didn't do anything. He didn't say you're bad, you're wrong. It was just being embarrassed that I before I met him, I was starting to kind of reestablish something. If I had met, if Rinpoche had stayed around, then I might have had a chance to go and see him again. But I don't know, it's hard to speculate on that. But no, until I met Coben. Even when I met Coben, I felt like I don't need another teacher. But I did. Other question? Anyone out there? Okay, we can close.
May the merit penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho San Shi Shri Hu Shri Son Bu Sa Mo Ku Sa Mo Ko Cha Ho Ro Mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. We do have a donation box at the end. If you can help us, please, we will take your donations.